Well, this is Steve Ridgel, and in light of the recent Roe versus Wade reversal, and now abortion not being as readily available, much less pushed by government or anybody else, it's time for churches and Christians to think about how do we help with the babies being born that might not have lived in previous years. Even in our own fellowship among churches, what if we have more babies born? And what if we convert people who now have more children than they would have had, and people on the fringes maybe, or people in difficult situations? And so I've been sharing a few videos from time to time about organizations that help. And so I thought today I'd talk a little bit about the church. Not just Christians, because I believe Christians are the church, and I do believe Christians have always stepped up. Almost every Christian I know, when they see a family in need, they help. But I'm thinking now in terms of a big church structure, organized church programs. Do we need to rethink some of those if we're truly going to have more and different, and how we do that? For instance, are we going to provide nursery care, and how extensive is that going to be? And what are we going to do about our Bible classes? Do we need to rethink those? Do some of the Christians that haven't taught in the younger grades, do they need to step up for Bible class and say, I'll teach again? And do we need to recruit some? Do some of the older ladies that retired need to come back and teach? Do some of the moms that want their kids taught, do they now have to step up and say, there's some single moms bringing kids and they need help and I'm going to teach? Do we need to have some teacher training programs for some of the new Christians and some of the people that don't usually teach? Do we need to do more of that? What about our youth programs? I've long thought one of the things we get very close to is sometimes it's expensive to be involved in an active youth group. It's expensive to go to camp. It's expensive to do all the activities. Now, I love youth ministers who do cheap activities that almost everybody can afford, but the truth is there may easily be people who we invite to church who now are in our church, or who come from families on the fringe financially. And we've got to think that through. Now, almost every group I know says, don't worry, if there's someone that can't afford, we will provide. I get that. Here's kind of the thing that's always bothered me about that. Are you sure you know the families that can't really afford it? Because sometimes there's a little sense of pride among a family that I don't want somebody having to help me. Sometimes kids, maybe they shouldn't be, but it's embarrassing for them or for their parents to say, we can't afford this. There's that fear that somebody's going to judge you for that somebody's going to look down at you for that. And so I love churches that do that for others, but I'm wondering if we ought to just say, hey, we're not going to do anything that costs very much money, or we're going to let everybody go free, or every child that wants to go to camp, we'll pay for everything, but they have to volunteer so many hours. Or maybe you do want to say, no, the families that can afford it will pay, and those that can't will figure out how to do that. But we better think those things through. There's going to be a need for more fill-in grandparents, guys that are father figures. We're going to think through some of those things. But the church has a real role to play in this. And I think, frankly, that a healthy congregation, a healthy church, can be really attractive to people on the margins. People, the mom who is trying to raise their kids, the family that had one more kid they really couldn't afford. And to know there's a church that will love you and support you and encourage you and help provide for you, and where your children can be in children's ministry and in youth programs and be taken care of. I think that opens a lot of evangelistic opportunities too. So this is Steve Ridgel, just reminding you, and we're talking about all the organizations that can and do help with all this influx of kids that may be born. The church needs to be right in the middle of that. And for a lot of you, that means you've got to get more involved.